think I've said this before. I get a thrill, I always do, when in real life, whatever that is, at a particular moment, I think of a text or a topic I am currently teaching, and at that particular moment, that text enters my mind. Well, I've had two such moments this past week that made me think of the farewell speech that we've been exploring, that Moshe has been delivering to Bnei Israel. I attended two funerals of two individuals that I never met, but I now know very well. On Thursday, over 1,000 people gathered at Mount Herzl to ensure that 20-year-old Rose Lubin, Zichrona Livracha, that her family knew that even though she was a lone soldier from Atlanta, Georgia, she was not alone here. She was a soldier in the border police, and her mother read her bat mitzvah speech. And just one brief sentence from it. As a kindergartner, she wrote, "I will be your friend now, but when I am 18," she wrote this when she was 5 years old, "I am going to Israel and I will join the IDF." And the second funeral was this past Sunday, attended by thousands. 44-year-old Yossi Chaim Hershkovitz, a musician, an educator, a principal of a Jerusalem Ort boys high school, a brother, a son, a friend, a father of 5, a husband. Yossi's brothers, when eulogizing, did not hesitate to say how idiotic of you, 44, to have gone to battle. Why not leave it to the younger generation? You weren't called up, but they answered their own question, knowing just how important this country, this people are to Yossi, and how he believed it is time to destroy Hamas for us and for the world. And each of his own children and his wife, Hadass, echoed that sentiment. Abba, ata hagibur shalanu. But perhaps the most difficult eulogy to listen to was that of his brother-in-law, Uri, his wife's brother. He was also in Gaza, and they would see each other and they would laugh, as they were accustomed to doing back home. But he was a medic. And when Yossi was hurt, his brother-in-law was the one to take care of him. And so in his eulogy, he couldn't help but apologize and beg his forgiveness for not having been able to save him. Can you imagine? And just one final word about Yossi. The Friday before he was killed, he recorded a video to the students of his school. And he said, and that's why I said we'll get back to that comment about from. He says to his students, today in Israel, there is no right wing, there is no left wing, no Haredim, just Jews. And I am asking you, dear students, do not go back to what was before. And this is a mixed school. It's just boys, but it's mixed. Do not go back to what was before, and do not speak Lashon Hara about anyone in Israel. And he ends with saying, I know we will win. I miss you. Shabbat Shalom. So these two moments, Rose and Yossi, Zichronam Livracha, how do they relate to Moses' farewell speech that we have been exploring? Let me share my screen. Re'ei anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, I am giving before you today a blessing and a curse. As Moshe is speaking to the Israelites, he says, I am giving before you a blessing and a curse. It will be up to you to decide which way you're going to go. Now, you see that I bolded two Hebrew words. I am positive that a few of you, at least, can note a discrepancy in the grammar here between the two words that are bolded, Re'ei and Lifnechem. I'll give you a few seconds to note it. Re'ei, see. Is that singular or plural? Anyone?
Singular.
Singular.
Singular. But
Lifnechem
then,
plural.
and Lifnechem is plural.
Did she hear you?
I
Yes,
heard you.
Yeah.
Lifnechem is plural.
Mhm.
This is something that happens rather often when Moshe or God is talking to Bnei Israel, talking both to the Israelites as a collective, but also to each individual. What's being suggested? And it's a message that Rose and Yossi and so many here and by you understand. We are individuals, but we are meant to feel that we are part of an of a collective. And when this is being said, it's being said in the Arava. And the shorish of Arava, Arev, is the same word that means guarantor. So figure that out. We are each a guarantor for the other. And that's what these two souls were for us. Now, we have discussed over the last number of weeks Moshe's concerns regarding power, going to a leader's head or even citizens' heads. And then we focused on perhaps an over concern with ritual or sacrifices versus social consciousness. Moshe has a third concern, the final one we are going to discuss in this series. What will happen when he disappears? Now, does that sound egotistical? Not necessarily. What is that fear based on? Anyone? Why would he be concerned with what's going to happen when he is ultimately not there at all?
No, there's
what
so
would
many
make him?
times that he defended the people before God, and there's so many times that they rose up against him. So he's not sure that they'll carry on the way he would hope them to.
They need him. Okay, fair enough. Good, Beth.
He's already had the experience when he went up to receive the Torah and he was gone. They descended into anarchy and into sin without him being there.
Exactly. Okay. When he was away for longer than they would have liked with the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, remember they got nervous. So he's feeling, if I never come back, what's going to be? Let's look at text number 1. He tells them, "For I must die in this land. I shall not cross the Jordan, but you will cross and take possession of that good land. Take care then not to forget the covenant that your God concluded with you, and not to make for yourselves a sculptured image in any likeness against which your God has enjoined you." So he doesn't trust that without him, they will stay on the right path. And his concern is also based on the fact that once they enter a land where they will be influenced by pagan neighbors, it won't be easy because they'll be influenced. And we know how easy it is to assimilate. Now, we continue with text 2. And so, in his final words, Micah says, Moses tells a story whose purpose is to enable the people to survive their separation from him. He refashions national memory in a way that puts him on the sidelines, as if he had never been the dominant figure in the life of the nation. We said this much earlier on, that he writes Sefer Dvarim from his perspective, not wanting them to feel that he was more important than them. He already wants them to feel that they are as important as them. Each individual. That's going to be our key message today. Not leaving the job for someone else. Moses minimizes his role in how he narrates the story of the Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the journey in the wilderness, because he wants to nurture within them a sense of them being independent of him. The people need to be convinced that they don't need him, because as long as you feel you've got somebody to rely on, you don't do the job necessarily by yourself. Micah suggests that the real sin of the golden calf was not the worship of the golden calf, but the worship of Moshe. Think about it. When you rely on somebody else, Micah tells the story of when it's as if when somebody is listening to a speaker or even a rabbi talking to you, giving a message, you're meant to do this, and you're sitting there and saying, well, he's not talking, she's not talking to me. She's talking to the person sitting next to me. Moshe doesn't want Bnei Israel to feel that. So now, as we look at text number 3, I want you to note the difference. As Moshe is talking about the covenant again, I want you to see the difference in the covenant that he's speaking about in Sefer Dvarim, Deuteronomy, as opposed to the one in Exodus, Shmot. You'll remember that in Shmot, he proposes the Brit, the covenant, and immediately Bnei Israel say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it and we'll listen. Well, it's quite different here. Pay close attention. And it will be on the day that you cross the Jordan to the land the Lord your God is giving you, that you shall set up for yourself huge stones and plaster them with lime. There's a whole ceremony around the covenant. When you cross the Jordan, okay, this is on one side, and now you're going to cross over, and Moshe won't be there. You shall write upon them all the words of this Torah, in order that you may come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord God of your forefathers has spoken to you. And it will be when you cross the Jordan that you shall set up these stones, regarding which I command you this day on Mount Ebal, and you shall plaster them with lime. Cursed be he who does not uphold the words of the Torah to fulfill them, and all the people shall say, Amen. So what happens here? The first part is given on the other side of the Jordan, but the people don't ratify it till they're on the other side. And then they say, Amen. So the question is, why the two-sided covenant? And what we mean by two-sided is, why is it proposed on the first side, but only ratified once Moshe is not with them? Anybody want to suggest a reason? Why does Moshe want them to only ratify the covenant, say yes to it, when he is no longer there? Anyone?
Bracha, I'm thinking that if he were there and they said it, it would be to please him. But if he wasn't there and they did it, it would be more of their own free will, or it would be from their perspective.
And why would that please him?
Because it would mean they did it independent of him.
Yefeh. Good, Brenda. Anyone else want to add to that?
He wants the people to rely on one another.
Say that again, Beth?
He wants the people to rely on one another and to be united together.
As opposed to relying on him. Yes, Bev.
He wants them to assume ownership and something that has to come from them, and that they are growing into it as opposed to having someone that they rely on all the time for everything.
Yes, Shirley Ann. Okay. David, you have to unmute yourself.
That okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think every one of us in our age group, some of us are, well, we're at the end, and there's a conversation we should be having with our children. And I think that on an individual basis, every house is its own community. And I think that sort of is what Moses is doing. He's telling his sons and his daughters and the rest of us what we should be doing after we're gone.
I think that's an interesting thought, David. He has been thinking about their future, but he is, in a sense, modeling to them already how one should act when they won't be around, because he's showing them what he's thinking about, knowing that he's not going to be around. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Bracha,
Now, yes.
I'd like to go back to the first sentence that's quoted, where you talked about the difference between singular and plural.
Okay, I'll take
and I think that all of this follows along because Moshe understands the nature of the Jewish people. And so he also understands that each one of us has different facets of our own personalities. So that when he starts talking to me, I might see it one way or I could see it the other way, depending on what side of my personality came to the fore. So he's talking, and so he's laying out a plan, understanding that they will need some guidance to follow the best of their nature rather than the worst of their nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're going to touch on that a little more in the next section that we're going to look at it. He is definitely aware that people have different natures, and he's definitely aware that they need a lot of guidance, and he's been saying that by him saying how absolutely necessary it is to keep on studying, and not in the sense of studying because you have to do this, you have to do that, but studying to open your mind. Thank you, Molly. Yes, Helen.
Bracha, let's put this in context. He's at the edge of Canaan and with these people after schlepping for 40 years with them, and the ordeal and the goal in front of them. And what he's saying is, in essence, we've reached the goal. Unfortunately, I can't come with you. And this is what it's all been about. and we're here, and don't blow it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bracha.
Now, if he used that one sentence, don't blow it, we wouldn't have a fifth book. Okay, yes. Somebody else was saying something.
It was me. Oh, sorry, I'm muted. Bracha, I was going to say, isn't it almost like a parent and children? You can raise your children and instill certain values in them and teach them, but at a certain point in time, you just have to let go.
Well,
so he's not going with them?
We can't.
No, I know that, but he's not going with them, and they just have to take responsibility for themselves at that point.
So he realizes that.
Yes.
Now, are you giving me a personal message? Have I told you something that?
No.
Okay. No. Okay. Yeah. All right. That is another way of looking at it. We give them all we can, and then at one point, yeah, you're on your own. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Let's look at this, and you might have more to say. So this is something else that adds to this notion of us being on our own, and actually Moshe and God encouraging that each of us is our own person, and we don't necessarily think that our tradition fosters that. And I've said this before. On the one hand, I think of our sages as being wonderful psychologists. On the other, I think the rabbis did some damage in certain areas, but we can't get into that now. But this is going to seem a bit strange, but you'll understand why. Moshe, Micah is going to stress, doesn't want somebody really to take over for him. He knows there has to be a Joshua for the time being, but he doesn't want there to be an intermediary between God and any human being. He wants there to be a direct connection between each of us and God through the Torah. Let us each read the Torah and interpret it. Let it speak to each of us. And it's got a lot to say. But let it speak to us and let us find it to be meaningful. Okay. So now look at what this says. It's an example that Micah gives. If there will arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder of which he spoke to you happens, and he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us worship them. In other words, he's a false prophet, and you shall not heed the words of that prophet or that dreamer of a dream, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you will really love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall follow the Lord your God, fear him, keep his commandments, heed his voice, worship him, and cleave to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of a dream shall be put to death, because he spoke falsehood about the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to lead you astray from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to go. So shall you clear away the evil from your midst. In other words, because it's maybe a little too verbose, if there's a false prophet, God says, you get rid of him. You people get rid of him. Versus, let's say there's a true prophet. What happens? I will set up a prophet for them, a true one, from among their brothers like you, and I will put my words into his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I command him. And it will be that whoever does not hearken to my words, that he speaks in my name, and I will exact of him. But the prophet who intentionally speaks a word in my name, which I did not command him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. Now, what do we note about the punishment of the false Navi and the punishment of the one who doesn't listen to the true Navi? Micah says the following. What happens when a true prophet arises and a particular citizen fails to obey him? Moses responds in the name of God. I myself will call him to account. People don't get to punish a human being who decides not to listen to a true prophet. In other words, the people do not have the authority to punish anyone who fails to obey the prophets. This punishment must be left to God. And so while God commands the people to kill a false prophet, they are not authorized to harm anyone who fails to listen to a true prophet. This is a striking asymmetry. A false prophet is killed, but a person who fails to listen to a true prophet is not subject to reproach. Moses' laws do not protect the false prophet, but they do protect from social or political sanction any person who fails to obey the true prophet. The priest has no religious status, the priest's role is limited, and the prophet is under threat. And why? Because God communicates his will directly to his people, who are in any case very close to him. What is being said here? You don't get to tell a human being what he is to understand from God. You don't get to enforce it upon him. What Moshe will say is, you must study. And you must believe that God is talking to you. Surely, in this pasuk, in Devarim, this commandment which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us, that we may observe it? No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it. And Micah closes, God may be in the heavens, but his Torah is here on earth. This isn't some Greek philosophy that God and Moshe gave us. Every one of us can understand this, so there is no need for an intermediary. Yes, we have teachers who specialize and teach us. Moreover, it is very accessible, says Micah. There is no need for intermediaries. There is no need for anyone to cross the sea, ascend to the heavens, or bring God's word to man. These verses encapsulate one of the key messages of Deuteronomy. A person stands directly before God without intermediaries. The phrase, the Lord your God, appears 234 times throughout the book of Devarim. Moses' address, in addition to attacking and attenuating all intercessors, declares to man that God is his direct God and that God's Torah is accessible to everyone in your mouth and in your heart. And this is what Micah Goodman is trying to relate in this book. Moshe wants the entire nation to relate to God. The entire society. And if you'll recall, we looked at another book of Micha's, The Wandering Jew. I forget if it's last year or 2 years ago. And he talked optimistically about Israelis, secular, looking toward the Bible, in secular yeshivot, looking for messages there. And a reawakening. And it hurt to hear what you said at the outset about those people choosing not to come. They have to be educated. It's a chilul Hashem. It's a chilul Hashem. That can't be what God intended. And that they don't see that. It's a chilul Hashem. Yesterday was, and this whole week and whole month, was an emotionally pack-filled day for me. The visit at Yam HaMelech, and as we left the hotel, a few minutes away, soldiers were standing as we were about to go toward En Gedi, warning us that we couldn't because there were flash floods. So we had to do a detour and go through Arad. So it took longer. And the one who was driving actually wanted to take a shortcut through Hebron. But the other three people in the car begged him not to. And then watching on TV, a family member of the 10-month-old baby being interviewed after seeing the baby bottle on the now famous video. Have you seen it? If you haven't, you must see the video of the IDF spokesman going through the hospital.
The basement.
Yes. So she was interviewed. I don't know how you lived through that. And then watching the rally. And then participating. One of the UN headquarters is about a 10-minute walk from our home. And there was yet another rally about freeing the hostages. And a doctor who works in a children's department at Hadassah spoke. And then all day I was waiting anxiously as my oldest friend's daughter was going through very serious surgery yesterday. So one thing I know, the first 4 items that I mentioned are as personal as the friend I just mentioned. And that's how we all have to feel about these issues. It is not me and the Jewish side of me, but this is me. That's how it has to be. Anyway, everybody please be well.
Bracha,
yeah.
Before you go, I want to pass on to the group that at least actions sometimes have positive results. You know what's happening in the universities and so on here, and the U of T is one of the notorious places. I belong to a group, it's the GTA Jewish SLP chat group. They've been very, very active, and they have gotten, the chairman of the department was posting highly anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian things on his LinkedIn and so forth. And although the university has been generally unresponsive, they got him censured and they got his LinkedIn erased. He can no longer access his account, and they have taken some action. So it was letters from that group, but there's about 100 members. And it was something very positive and did have a positive effect. So I want to pass along that, you know, sometimes you think your actions as individuals, as you were saying, but it can. It was just a couple of very active people from this group who made that happen.
Thank you, Brenda.
Yep. Bracha, I want to also point out that the National Post has been extremely positive in their reporting about what's going on. Yesterday, we actually had a photo of my cousins on the front page of the National Post, and one's 2 children that are in captivity. I thought that was remarkable.
So where are you going to leave that picture, Shirley-Ann?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one more thing for those of you who don't know, there's a very good letter to the editors today in the Toronto Star by Marcia Zalev. So all of you can get a chance to see it. Marcia is using her words frequently, and she does get published. So it's good to see that she's out there and doing what she can do. Kol hakavod, Marcy, even though she's not on this class.
Okay. Take care.